Welcome everyone to this discussion of expanding renewable energy finance. I'm Tamsin Booth, Technology and Business Editor of The Economist, and I'd like to welcome Benoit Felix, Global Head of Structured Finance at Santander. Thank you so much for joining us, Benoit.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. Very glad to be here.
Excellent. So I think we've got a lot to cover, so let's dive straight into it. To begin with a little bit of historical perspective, Santander has been a major presence in financing renewable energy really for a decade. It started really early and hence has led to a pretty commanding position for the bank. Can you give us a sense of that early history? How it started in the 1990s.
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, we started financing photovoltaic plants in Spain back in the 90s. We were one of the early adopters of the renewables. At that time, I can tell you there was not a lot of people around to finance those projects. Spain was a kind of natural landscape, right, to develop PV plants at that time. And gradually we expanded the business as our clients were also expanding it. So we grew this knowledge, we grew this business together with our clients. You may recall that some of the Spanish energy companies were champions, global champions, a decade ago in that field, right? So as the bank was also expanding, we grew the business significantly from Spain to the rest of the world. And I guess today we do business, from North America, so the US, Mexico, Brazil, Chile, and also in Europe, particularly, from UK, Spain, Portugal, and Poland, just to mention a few. And once again, we started as a lender, and we expanded the business through the advisory services as well. So now I would say that we are one of the top bank in that field. We ranked number one last year. And just to give you an example in terms of materiality, so we have a 7% market share in financing renewables. We finance more than 140 projects across the globe, and we have to develop, more than 14 gigawatts of new capacity. And it's something that we are doing, year after year, expanding this knowledge towards new territories. So we were also, one of the pioneer of the offshore wind business in the UK back in the 20s that time, and now we are once again one of the leaders in that field, and we are trying to expand this knowledge in new markets. So we just closed, just to give you an example, the first commercial scale offshore wind in the US last week. Vineyard, and it's been a very, very long journey, and we will comment afterwards. But I think that we are now, ready to deploy massive amount of capital in those new markets, so US and Asia in that field. So yes, very exciting journey, I would say, and we have a clear ambition to remain a leader in that space. Okay, so we
Benoit, just before we get on to the ambition, I'm curious to know from sort of management's perspective in the really early days, was the idea really that you had to support the clients that were moving heavily into solar energy, or was it seen as a really kind of profitable field? Was it kind of a sort of perceived as a very high growth area for the future? What was the key motivation from inside the bank?
So I guess, as you clearly pointed out, I think the first one was really to help our clients. We are a client-centric institution from the very stage, so it's DNA. So it was a necessity for our big clients to have a partner bank with them from the very beginning. Then obviously at the beginning it was also a profitable business. We are still a bank, not an NGO. So we had to adapt, the risk profile of the transaction just to make it happen. And then, it was a learning process. 20 years ago, I can tell you, we had to convince a lot of people internally to be, those crazy guys financing this kind of stuff, right? So it was a kind of win-win situation whereby we helped the client, they helped us to understand the technology, the risk, and we grew together, right? And it's a little bit the same situation today. Those very same clients and others need to, get into the hydrogen storage, etc., they need somebody to finance those projects and to understand what are the risks today and going forward, right? So it's a bit a role in that journey to be an early stage adopter and yeah, to work together with clients as a partner, because we know that the journey is going to be quite long.
And for the bank itself, in terms of return on capital, is this a really great area for pure shareholder return? Or how does it rank compared to other areas?
No, from a risk return perspective, I think we are quite, okay with what we see in the market today. It's been the case in the past as well. And by the way, Santander used to be an equity investor in that space. We sold our, renewable platforms to a couple of Canadian pension funds a couple of years ago, but we were also investing the bank equity in this business. Therefore, it was definitely an area where we feel comfortable about the returns.
And
Today
are
is a
those
little bit different.
returns going up, or are they about the same, or what's the
That was
trajectory
the second
as
part
obviously renewable
yeah.
energy becomes ever more important?
Now that was the second part of my answer. So today, for a bank, it's quite difficult to invest in that field. I mean, as you know, the cost of equity of financial institutions is going up due to, between others, regulatory constraints, right? And we see the returns in infrastructure in general, and renewables in particular, going down. I mean, there is a massive amount of liquidity out there. The risk profile today is not the same than 20 years ago. So today it's quite difficult to have decent returns from an equity perspective, but also from a debt perspective. There is a lot of pressure on margins, a lot of liquidity available, a lot of people calling in. So it's more and more difficult to do profitable business from a bank perspective. Having said that, because we have the experience we have, we can get into different, I would say, markets. So we are going up, I would say, in the capital structure, so more mezzanine kind of instrument, more holdco, and we do advisory, which is a nice way to enhance the returns, right? But it's getting tough, and it's one of the challenge for the industry, right? Is having liquidity is good, but you need profitability to mobilize such a liquidity, right?
Absolutely. And then, so getting on to some of the more tricky elements. So the way in which the European Commission calls for renewable energy finance to be mainstreamed within the industry suggests that it still considers the field to be kind of niche and special. Is that an accurate view in your opinion? And why is there this perception if it's a little wrong?
That's a very good point. I guess I would have shared this view a couple of years ago. There were not that much, people around the table when we financed the first, offshore wind in the UK, for instance. But in my opinion, at least, I think it's not the case anymore today. And when we see, those very big projects that we are currently financing in the UK, I mean, the Dogger Bank was like, multi-billion projects, and you have plenty of liquidity. It's massively oversubscribed. Same story in the US, the projects I was mentioning before. So I think today there is a lot of liquidity around.
Just to de-jargonify that, Benoit, there's just a lot of money wanting to finance renewable energy.
Yes, and it's I would agree that it's quite new in the sense that it's something that happened, over the last, let's say, 2 years. But now I think the real challenge is not there. The challenge is to find big projects to canalize such a liquidity, right? So in Europe, in particular in Europe, you have a lot of very small projects, and it might be difficult to channel all this very big money to these very small projects. So
and
there
why
is a
are there
situation
not more big projects? Why is there a lack?
Yeah, I think one of the answer to this question is that it takes time to develop those very big projects, right? So just to give you an idea, for plain vanilla PV farm in Spain, it takes between 2 and 3 years. between the moment you get the land and the moment you actually connect to the grid and you produce electricity. But for mega big projects in offshore wind, it takes 6, 7, 8 years. So all these, ambitions that we see in the different countries in Europe, it will take a certain amount of time to get it through the reality.
And
So
how long do you think it should take, Benoit?
no, I
I mean,
think the
if you
yeah.
got rid of any sort of political kind of regulatory delay or inefficiency, how long should it be taking, and what's the way to cut that kind of process?
Yeah, I mean, if we can reduce by, 50% I would say, administrative burden. So once again, I'm not pretending to avoid all those permitting, which are totally necessary. The point is, when it takes 1 year to get a license, maybe administration could work together with the private sector to make it in 6 months. So I think, and we are seeing, things moving now. But once again, it's not going to be tomorrow that we're going to see, massive amounts of big projects. I mean, they have been, the development started a couple of years ago. So we're going to see this very big elephant in 2 or 3 years' time. So in the meantime, we have to channel this liquidity to smaller projects, build portfolios, aggregate very small projects into, decent size portfolio to attract this liquidity. But I guess at least you were mentioning politicians and administration, they understand the challenge, and we see that some of the countries are already changing or trying to smooth the process to accelerate things.
Right, no, that's good to hear. And of course, the EU's national energy and climate plans are aiming to have a renewable energy share of 32% by 2030. How realistic is that? How far off are we? And what needs to be done to kind of improve the risks, to get to ameliorate some of the risks and difficulties that you've been describing?
So I think that coming back to my previous point, we know that there is a lot of big projects in the pipeline right now. So UK is a common player in that field, but we see new countries coming into those offshore wind. I mentioned offshore wind because of the size of the projects. I mean, these are 1 gigawatts per deal. So you just need, a couple of them to make things work. But I was mentioning UK, Poland is a newcomer in that space. And because of the pressure they are receiving on the coal side, we are going to see probably a lot of development in that area. France is launching a new RFP as we speak. So I'm quite optimistic on the quantity of mega project. The question mark is linked to the first question. The previous question is the timing. So I'm not that sure that we're gonna make it by 2030, but at least we see that we could potentially make it if we stretch everything, and if we manage the administration and the private to work together in shortening the delays. And then we have also a lot of self-consumption projects or PV on the rooftops, which are more something that that individuals and retail and SMEs can do on their own. And this is if you put everything together, that's also a massive part of the market as well. And this is moving.
Yeah.
This is moving in countries such as Netherlands, even Poland or Spain. So we see more and more people that is willing to join this green revolution, and that's a game changer, definitely. I don't know if it's linked or not to the current situation on the electricity price, right? Which might be another element that could drive
Yes,
or
I wanted
accelerate
to ask you
movement.
about that. I mean, this so-called energy crisis, soaring wholesale gas prices. What do you think is going to be the impact of that? Is it going to speed up the shift to renewable energy, or does it sort of highlight kind of worries that renewables aren't reliable enough, that we need the fossil fuels?
Yeah. So I definitely think it's going to help. But renewables are not the solution to the current crisis. It's part of the solution, but it's not the only solution. Part of the problem that we are facing today is a problem of model, right? We are using a marginal model in Europe Therefore, the price of the energy is somehow fixed by the last technology, that you put into the grid. And,
Mhm.
renewables, I would love that renewables, would allow to have 100% of the electricity needs covered, but that's not going to be the case, even in a short, medium term. So you will always need something else. And this something today is heavily based on gas. And when you see that the price of the gas has been multiplied by 4 over the last 6 months, it
Yeah.
automatically translates into the price of energy. So unless we find another fantastic source of energy to substitute the gas, in the medium short term, we will have this problem unless we change the model. So I think it's a combination, obviously, of having more renewables. I mean, last year it was the best year ever in Europe for renewables.
Mhm.
38% of the electricity was actually produced by renewables. We might double this by 2030, but you will still be missing 40%. And it's coming from nuclear, from gas, etc. So at the end of the day, if we don't change the model, we might see the electricity price moving up again in the coming years, right? So I guess there is a reflection to be held at the European level to see whereby we need to change the model.
Does Santander back higher taxes on carbon? I read in figures recently that only globally only about a fifth of carbon emissions are covered by carbon taxes, which is shockingly low, I think. And then only 4% of emissions are covered by a carbon tax of at least $40 per ton, which would start to be meaningful. Does the bank have a position? I hope that you're lobbying behind the scenes.
No, we are part of different task force on the topics. I think you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. Part of the solution to decarbonize the world is to have a common and global framework. We have to be very careful as well. I mean, this transition needs to be fair, and we need to understand the impacts of having this tax all around the world. It's not the same to impose it on very healthy corporates in Europe when you look at
Mhm.
situations in emerging markets. So we need to understand the effects, but definitely it's part of the solution. And by the way, I mentioned the gas price, but I mean the price of covering the emissions is also part of the recent crisis in Europe in terms of energy price. So it gives you an idea of what could happen if we suddenly put a very high tax on all emissions. But once again, I think tax is like the stick. But we also need the carrots, and we also
Mhm.
need corporate society to really act from the behavior, from the pressure that it can put as a society on different stakeholders. So tax is part of the solution, but I would rather engage as well from a stakeholder perspective on the positive side. I mean, it's
Mhm.
it's it's good not to contaminate, it's not to avoid paying tax, right?
Absolutely. I'm fascinated to know also how, for the future, when you look forward, how do you think technology and innovation are going to help with the transition to renewable energy? What are you really excited about in terms of new technologies that get us to these goals?
So innovation will definitely play, an amazing role. We see a lot of investment coming into those clean techs, and a lot of information coming. So on one side, it would help reducing costs. On another side, will help mitigate some impacts such as recycling, etc. But I'm very excited about new tech such as green hydrogen. We are at Santander strong believers of hydrogen as part of the solution. We are
Mhm.
investing time to do GVs between companies such as Plug Power and Acciona in Spain, amazing GVs to produce green hydrogen in Iberia. We are also working on applications. I mean, if we have the green hydrogen, we need the applications to burn
Mhm.
the green hydrogen, right? So I think it's very exciting. It's moving now, and we're gonna see entire industries transitioning very fast. I mean, look at the automotive sector. That's another example. They started with the batteries. I know we see that they are putting pressure on the green steel, the green plastics. So we see that the world is changing very fast, And obviously, innovation is definitely a key point in that transformation.
And what role do you see carbon capture playing in future, and how rapidly do you think that could scale up?
Now we will need it. I mean, if you look at the different scenarios, it seems that there is no other way than capturing at some stage part of the carbon we produce. So I guess, oil and gas companies are already working very hard on this kind of features that you plug onto your existing production capacity. So we are starting to see a lot of projects in that field. I mean, there is the first utility scale project in Iceland that has been, commissioned a couple of weeks ago. So it starts. We still need a lot of innovation to make it, affordable and at scale, but definitely is part of the solution as well.
Benoit, sadly, we've got so much to discuss, but we are running out of time. I want to ask you one last question, because, of course, Santander has plenty of fossil fuel clients, large companies that are facing a very different world in the future than they could have imagined 5-10 years ago. In particular, oil majors are under huge pressure from both regulators and investors to divest from fossil fuels and develop cleaner energy. How does Santander balance the mix of pressure and encouragement in handling these very important relationships?
Exactly. So, I mean, our ambition is really to help all our clients to transition, right, including oil and gas companies. So we are definitely working together with them in, I would say, two ways. The first one, as you already mentioned, is to develop their renewable business. So they're transforming from oil and gas companies to energy company, and therefore they're investing a massive amount of money into renewables, and we are working with them on that front. But we are also working with them, as I mentioned earlier, to decarbonize their existing production capacity. So just a very short insight here. I mean, we as an institution, we are one of the founders member of the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So we commit on our side to align our own loan book portfolios to net zero scenarios by 2050, and we are also publishing targets and action plan on a whole sensitive sector in that field. And obviously, oil and gas is going to be there. So we're going to publish probably in the coming months what we're going to do there. But we already published what we are going to do in the power generation sector. And we will be aligned by 2030. So pretty much in advance with respect to the 2050 calendar. And we will stop, for example, doing business with people that extract more than 10% of revenues from burning coal. So I guess we're going to come up with something like this with oil and gas company. But I think the solution, in our mind, is really to work together with them to support their transition, to see what we can do, and obviously to engage on a day-to-day basis. And at some stage we might need to take a decision with some of them, right? But for the time being, our role as a bank institution is really to help everybody in that very long journey, and to assess what we can do as a bank.
Yes, the position on coal producers, I think, is lends a lot of grit to the position, so to speak. So that's excellent. And I mean, I guess the last question, just if we could just very briefly talk about what you expect broadly from the corporate sector. In terms of how they tackle supply chains. I mean, because it's not just their use of energy, is it? It's their entire, sort of the need to green entire supply chains. How quickly do you see that happening in response to regulation?
Yeah, no, it's happening very quickly. As I was mentioning before, I think the fuel of this change is the pressure from society, right? From stakeholders, from clients. At the end of the day, we as client, we are raising the bar in terms of what we expect from our companies, right? So I was mentioning the automotive sector, which is a good example, but it's happening everywhere. So every company today has its own ESG policy in place. They are implementing different KPIs, in terms of diversity, CO2 footprint. And if you want to deliver this journey in terms of just taking the CO2 part, you would need to push pressure on you, but also on your providers. So
Yeah.
that's why we are seeing a kind of domino effect, which is happening very, very fast. And the good thing for renewables is that, at the beginning of every single journey, decarbonizing your supply chain, you need green energy, right? So we, in any case, we need to develop more and more renewables. But I'm glad to see that it's not only this, as you mentioned, is about electrifying everything. So changing your trucks with trucks that will consume hydrogen instead of oil, your machines, everything. So it's really fascinating to see how fast it's going up, and we see today, green steel, green cement. It's coming very, very fast, which is a very good news for the planet, I guess.
This is very good news. Thank you so, so much, Benoit, Felix, for these excellent insights. I've really enjoyed chatting. And thank you to the audience. I hope you found that insightful and interesting. And please do stay with us for the next session, which is going to start shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.